Hello, you are watching and listening to the Salty Witches podcast.
Hello.
Hello. So we are back after the holidays, and
We have a whole bunch of listener questions to get caught up on.
yeah,
So this episode is just going to be answering questions that have kind of just been sitting in limbo for the last 3 weeks, roughly 3 weeks. It's only been 3 weeks. It seems longer than that, but it really only has been 3 weeks. The holiday season is rough, y'all. All right, let's dive in because this is probably going to be a beefy episode. All right, question from our buddy Carlos. All right, question about meditation. They say that they are not very good at it. You're probably better than you think. Most people who are like, I'm not good at meditation, usually the reason for that is that you're just not meditating properly. Or sorry, let me rephrase that. You're not trying to meditate in the right way because there are different ways to meditate.
mhm.
Um, but you keep trying, which is the important thing. Okay. I don't really see anything when in a meditative trance. You're not supposed to. I see lights and colors. That's cool, but that's definitely a you thing. Like being inside of a prism, surrounded by white light and seeing something, a red light behind the white light. I have no way of interpreting what is happening, if anything. Am I doing something wrong, or is that just the way your mind works? Any thoughts?
So everyone's mind obviously works differently, and as many people as there are out there who meditate, there are that many ways to do it effectively and efficiently. There are some baseline things that we want to remember when we're meditating. First, it's not about clearing your mind; it's about bringing focus to something. Unless we have been trained from the age of 5, like a Zen Buddhist monk, to clear our mind and work in that way. Our mind here in the West just doesn't work like that. And that's not how our neural pathways and all those behavioral cognizant things work. So you're not doing anything wrong there. Uh, Seeing things can be common in meditative trance. Sometimes, if you're looking for a vision, this sounds to me like you might be projecting a little bit, or maybe you're just being aware of some of the energies around you. I wouldn't necessarily be too concerned about it. If you feel good about it, then don't worry about it. If your fire alarms aren't going off and your spidey senses are tingling, then you should be fine. The only person who can really interpret that is you, unless you want to sit with someone who is a mentor one-on-one or something like that and see if there's any significances there. At least that's my take on it.
Okay. I would agree. I think the only thing that I might add to that would be that it's important to pay attention when we're experiencing physical phenomena during our meditative process.
Yes.
I think it's important to pay attention to the actual physical environment that you're in. A lot of people have related experiences over the years, like people that Austin and I have mentored or people we've taught. Have related experiences, kind of along the lines of the one that you've shared, where, they're talking about, having really strong visuals of, like meditating, and they're, I'm trying to think of a for instance now. Well, I don't want to relate anybody's personal details. That's okay. But yeah, like as a for instance, right? Like they're I'm in a room right now that is like I call this like the nickname is like the jungle room because this is kind of where I keep the majority of my plants. And so there are lots of hanging plants and vines and things all over the room here, and so as a for instance, like if I were to sit and meditate in this room with either my physical eyes being open or just with my visual, my memory of this room, it's highly likely that in a meditative state, I might have things like the color green or visualizations of plants and trees and that kind of natural fauna coming through to me in a meditative state because those are going to be the energies of this space and that's going to ultimately be what I'm coming into contact with as I'm more open in a meditative state. And so pay attention to what you have around you as you've shared some of the physical details of what you're experiencing. If you are meditating in a space where maybe maybe you were close to, say, like a big bright open window where you're getting like a lot of natural light, or if you're in a space maybe where you're getting
Have a candle lit.
like bright reds, or you're meditating where you have like a flashing candle light. Exactly. That might maybe explain why you're seeing some of those light associations. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's actually a good thing. Like that's kind of part of utilization of focus, visual focus through meditative process. So yeah, so it's a good thing. Um, yeah, cool question though. Keep trying, and again, remember, as Austin was saying, like the purpose of meditation for the average person is not to achieve clear mind. Achieving clear mind is not going to do a damn thing for the average person. The purpose of meditation for the average person is really primarily to build focus and to facilitate
Focus,
greater,
mindfulness.
yeah, and to facilitate greater sensitivity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
keep
potentially
at
even
it.
control over your senses.
Yeah, keep at it. Meditation is one of those things I think, and I don't know, maybe Austin, if you have, maybe you can share or relate to this experience, but I find that meditation, for myself and for a lot of other people I've engaged with over the years, it's one of those things where it's kind of like you're doing it, you're doing it, you're doing it, and you're kind of like, oh, it's not working, oh, it's not working, oh, it's not working, and then but you keep at it, and then all of a sudden, like one day you just sit down and you do it, and it's like, oh shit, it worked.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those weird things where it's just like you really just you need to be persistent. So don't get discouraged. Just stick with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay, and that was what we had. So thank you so much for that question.
Thank you,
All
Carlos.
right. Okay, so we're gonna move to a different saltine. Okay. All right. And they gave us like a little bit of personal explanation here, kind of about themselves, and just like a little bit of their background. And I'm not gonna, a lot of this is very personal, and so I'm not gonna share all of this, just because again, this is very personal. And everybody out there in the world doesn't need to know all of this about them. So their questions. So they saw the episode that we did on deity work, and they had a couple of questions with regards to spiritual/religious searching. Um, as we already okay, so this is them. Okay, as you already know, a lot of people who leave behind an often strict religious upbringing, including this person's fellow ex-evangelicals, go through a deconstruction process. Personally, this listener is a pantheistic monolater Christian witch. So let me break that down. So they are pantheistic in that they believe in many gods,
Okay.
but they are a monolater in the sense that they really only work with and or pray to devote to one particular deity,
Okay.
right? Which is not uncommon. That's actually a pretty common dynamic for a lot of alternative theistic spiritual practitioners. A lot of us are, say, like in your practice,
Hmm.
right? Like you acknowledge many goddesses, right? But kind of like your big go-to is Hecate, right?
Yes.
So you are, in essence, kind of similar to this Saltine in that you are pantheistic, or yeah,
Yeah.
right. But you,
Pantheistic, where I
yeah, but
believe
yeah,
that
but
there.
you primarily, I have something in my eye. I'm so sorry, everybody. I keep rubbing my eye. I've got something in my eye. But you really primarily just kind of go to the one, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So that's kind of the case here. Okay. And they identify as a Christian witch, which, I again, just for the sake of transparency, in past, we've had some issues with that term to even to this day. I'll be honest, I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about the combination of those things. I think ultimately that everybody needs to kind of make that determination and for themselves. Everybody is, of course, entitled to identify however they wish. um I see some challenges in practice and in ideology and philosophy, I guess, um, in trying to combine those two things, because in essence, you're going sooner or later, you're going to run into problems between the theology of witchcraft and the basically a lot of the history and the philosophy and the practice of witchcraft. Like that, there are going to be challenges there, and so they can be very dichotomous, and you're going to have to jump through a lot of mental hurdles, I think, and certainly a lot of emotional hurdles to be able to combine those things effectively. And it's just been my experience that a lot of people that try to combine those things end up causing themselves a lot more trouble in the long run. And it's just, I think, in my personal opinion, easier just to just pick one. Like I think a lot of the time people who kind of do this to themselves, like it seems like if you kind of dig in a little bit or you can get them to kind of talk a little bit more about that, a lot of the time they just haven't really been able to fully deconstruct the Christianity, right? Like they're still kind of holding on to a piece of that because there still is fear or guilt or shame
Mhm.
there, And I'm in no way am I trying to imply that this is the case for this saltine, right? I'm not. In no way am I trying to go there with that. I don't know. It seems to me to be like a very complicated position to choose to put yourself in,
Yeah.
right? Because you can't really pursue either path. It's hard to move forward in any one direction when you have a foot basically moving you in two separate paths,
Hmm.
right? I don't know. I'll shut up on that now. Anyway, so back to their questions. Okay. Let's see. So moving on. Okay. Even though they chose to remain within the religion of their upbringing, they had to strip church culture from to the bare bones of the messages. So basically, they're still incorporating Christianity,
Hmm.
and doctrine, Christian doctrine into their practice. Other people leave their faith entirely, though, and have begun looking for other helpful options if they still want to work with deities. So yeah, so again, basically somewhere in the process of deconstruction, but not having fully removed Christian doctrine.
Hmm.
So first question, I guess, do you think there is a difference between spiritual searching and deconstruction, or are they inexorably linked as a package deal?
I think they're an extra link as a
Yeah,
package deal. In order for you to
yeah,
deconstruct, you have to see what else is out there, and to see what else is out there, you have to deconstruct and
yeah,
open your mind.
hmm
You
yeah,
cannot and should not have one without the other.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question to this saltine though, um,
Well, we're answering questions. We're not asking
true.
questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So this
I
isn't, we're not interrogating our listeners.
well,
Yeah.
I still have an issue with the whole Christian witch thing.
Well, it's okay.
Whatever
Well,
you
you
do,
can, but it's working. If it's working for them,
exactly.
then
I
that's
just don't
okay.
understand why they would choose to do that when there's an entire folk magic practice that is literally centered around that.
W-
Conjure root work,
Well,
Appalachian folk
maybe,
practice, Dutch Pictus
well, that
magic.
they may feel that that's something that maybe they don't have access to. People feel called to different things. And they not maybe they don't feel a particular call to those other paths or traditions, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to hold on
No,
the
there's not.
to the tenets of Christianity, particularly if you're holding on to the good stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's not.
the shit that
I
the shit that we think Jesus actually really cared about and taught
I
people,
would
that's the good shit, right? That's the good stuff.
I would just say that
So,
they should look into some like British cunning magic and stuff because there's a lot of things that would be really great for them in that as long as they didn't try and go down the like, you know, crooked path road or whatever.
well,
Anyway,
well,
anyway, we're moving on. Next
potentially
question. Next part of
that's
it.
okay. That's okay. I mean, this person is they are absolutely entitled to do whatever they want with their own path, and they should not feel judged or shamed for that.
Exactly.
Um, so all
I
right,
may
let's
not
see.
get it, but that's okay.
Well, yeah, like I said, and again, we don't need to. Not our path, not our path, not our practice. Okay, second question. How would you encourage people to build their practice while still searching? Um, that is a really good question, and and I'm gonna say it's gonna be tricky to actually build a practice while you're in the process of searching, because your practice is.
It's going to be fluctuating and changing so
Mhm,
much that trying to adhere to one thing is going to be hard. So, what I personally would suggest is you want to start with the basics
yeah,
of any spiritual practice, which requires routine and ritual.
yeah,
It requires a sense of knowing of self. It requires uh, obviously research and stuff like that. But in any spiritual practice that goes outside of what we would consider
mhm,
like religious, a lot of them are based in a focus around your personal relationship with God, whatever that may be for you.
Mhm.
And it sounds like you're already doing that, but for people who would be searching, then I would say that's kind of what you want to do is instead of removing entirely from there, going from there is something to there is nothing, thinking more in a sense of, I guess, chaos magic, if I'm really being honest.
I don't know that chaos magic would necessarily be a direction I would point this person just because they are intent on kind of being theistic in
Well,
practice.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Um,
Like if you're spiritually exploring, chaos magic would be a good place to start with. If you're wanting to go into magic, that's the
uh,
thing. That's the
well,
thing is,
they don't really qualify magic here. They're just talking a spiritual practice.
oh, okay.
So, I think what I would say or what I would maybe add to this is um to kind of tack on to some of what you were just sharing is like I think that when we talk about a spiritual practice, particularly when we're new into a practice, the beginning of any spiritual practice really primarily needs to revolve around you and your learning and your growth and your healing. And by extension, or I should say, maybe the next step of that, when you get to that point, because too many people rush through this. Too many people, they take a class, they read a book, they buy a deck of tarot cards, and after they've done that one or two thing, those one or two things, they immediately proclaim themselves a priestess and they appoint themselves some sort of community elder, and they're out there trying to do really big, powerful, important work for everyone else. And that's
And they've done
always
no work
and
for
that's
themselves.
always a misstep because sooner or later that is going to come back and it's going to bite them on the ass in a horrible way. And not only that, it's going to put them in a position to cause a lot of trouble for a lot of other people.
And potentially hurt people.
And so your spiritual practice at the beginning, as you are really kind of doing the bulk of that spiritual seeking, and spiritual seeking, that search never
Never
stops.
stops.
That never stops, ever, ever, ever. Even when you are firmly established in a spiritual practice that's working for you, that practice is still going to evolve because you're always going to be evolving. And if you're not, then I'm going to say you're doing something wrong. You need to kind of look at what's going on in your life and with your practice, because if nothing's ever changing, oof, something's amiss.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. So you're beginning, they're easily the first few years of any spiritual practice, that first few years of that seeking process is going to be what you need as an individual.
Yes.
And the good thing about that is that you can be involved in pretty much any spiritual practice, any kind of spiritual seeking or searching, and still be focusing primarily on what you need. And you're not going to really run into any kind of trouble,
Yep.
right? You're good. You're good, right? So you don't need to be, I think, as worried about that. Okay. I think as far as building past that, again, as I mentioned a moment ago, your next step really is primarily going to be to focus on how you can take the healing and the growing that you've done as a person, maybe those first few tenets, those first few things that you've learned that have really kind of proven to work for you in your personal practice, and then look for ways that you can apply those to the community around you in constructive ways. And when I say community around you, I don't mean the pagan or the spiritual community. I mean, your community. I mean, go out and volunteer.
Yes.
Go out and fucking give sandwiches to homeless people. Go out and write a check, even if it's only for like 10 fucking bucks to the local food bank. You know, like support community in those day-to-day material human ways. A lot of people overlook that. They don't think oh, that's not spiritual work, but that is the most important spiritual work any of us can be doing.
Hmm.
And there is nothing about that you can get in trouble with,
Hmm.
right? And so your path is first you intensive, beyond that, your position of service to your community. And it doesn't matter how you're building, what you're learning. There are in practically limitless ways to apply those things to yourself and your community. Right. So that's going to be what I recommend. And those are going to be the best ways to move forward. I think not only because you're doing the most good for yourself and your community, but you're also through the process of avoiding the most trouble. Um, Yeah, don't become the next self-appointed priestess or guru. Oh God, we don't need any more of them in the community. There are too many already, and all they do is annoy the fuck out of the rest of us because they're not really doing anything.
Just charging exponential amounts
They
for
just clog up
someone else's culture.
they clog up the ether and clog up the chat rooms and stir trouble and drama amongst the people out there that are actually really trying to get some shit done. All right, let's see. Third question. It's a delicate and emotionally fraught time in people's lives. Boy, is that ever true? Damn. What would you recommend as a healthy manner in which to approach that process? Um, I'm assuming the process, once again, going back to the like
Deconstruction.
soul searching or spiritual searching.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, absolutely, like a process of deconstruction as well. Um,
So this is something I actually talked about in
yeah, the last
the
temple of
last Temple of
Hecate
Hecate.
Apotropæa service. Yeah, went into this. Yeah.
Find your anchors of reality. Anchors of reality are most commonly going to be in your community. Anchors of reality are not just the things that are real that we can touch. Anchors of reality are how we choose in those moments to interact with those things. So, an anchor of reality for me personally is I get up and I go into the store on the days that I'm behind the counter and I go there because that is where I'm supposed to be to do the work I'm supposed to do. Every person I interact with, I get to choose how we interact and how I interact to them. And so choosing the anchors of reality during times like now, like right now where it's emotionally fraught and there's a lot of high strung things, the anchors of reality that fulfill you and that you fulfill. So I guess your twin anchors of reality, if you will. So one thing that I actually use as an example in the service was actually going, like, you see that you could help someone, give them a couple of bucks so they can get a hot cup of coffee or maybe a sandwich. That's an anchor of reality because that is reality. If we're constantly living off in a dreamland, we're never able to affect what can happen here in the real world, in the physical world we live in. So that's what you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that again, that's going to kind of take me back to something I said again a moment ago, where I think so much of what we do day to day in the material world overlaps so strongly with our spiritual path,
100%.
and where we sometimes feel like we don't know how to step forward in the spiritual, we can maybe sometimes more clearly see how to move in the material, and those paths weave together a lot. Like they're very much the same path,
Hmm.
really, and so in looking at answering that, I want to say if you're looking at, like the fraught nature of the world that we live in, um, look for, in essence, kind of what just the next best action. That's a bit of wisdom that is popping up in a lot of different ways. I think most recently, one of the other people that we've had on the podcast, and it's been a long time, but Thumper Forge, who is just a very intelligent man, and an author that we were very lucky to have on the podcast a couple years back. Um, Thumper Forge, if you're not familiar, he pops up all over the internet. He's always good for, well, he's very knowledgeable.
Yes, he's
Um,
good for a laugh. He's good for
he's very funny
yes,
and yeah, but also very intelligent. And anyway, but Thumper Forge
damn Virgos.
posted something recently where he was basically just kind of talking about just really kind of just doing just the taking just the next best action,
Yes.
just focusing on just doing the next best thing, and the wisdom of that, when you find yourself in a moment where things are just really fucked up, and it doesn't seem to matter what you do or the condition of society or the world or the people that you're dealing with. It's like everything is just wrong. And in that moment where you really just don't seem to have an ideal solution or really a good way forward, to just choose like what is the next best thing.
Yes. What is the
You
next
know,
best thing
um,
I can do,
yeah,
not only for myself, but for the benefit of others?
yeah, and let that be
And
what you do.
exactly. And sometimes by benefiting yourself, it might not benefit others, but in the long run, it might.
Well, I think if you look at if if you are a spiritual person, if you are in someone who puts in any kind of a concept or any kind of level of faith in the concept of metaphysics, hermetics, anything like that, you've got to put a little bit of belief behind the idea of that we're all in some sense kind of connected,
Hmm.
and so with that in mind, I like to encourage people to do kind things for other people,
Yeah.
not with the idea that it will benefit you, but with the understanding that because we are all connected, that yes, in some way, somewhere down the line, that absolutely will definitely
Hmm.
benefit you.
Yeah.
If we could take care of the people that we deem the least in our community, we could lift those people up. We could give them security and health and stability and give them positions within society where they could function. I mean, who knows what they could do to support our society, right? I mean, we could see some of the things that we identify as dysfunction in our society be completely resolved by some of the very people that we look at as being a component of the dysfunction. I mean, so there's just no way of knowing what can happen when we extend kindness
Kindness
and we
costs nothing.
and we do something. Well, I don't know that I always agree with that. I've done some kindnesses for people over the years that have definitely ended up costing me quite a bit, but
Kindness can cost nothing.
yeah, ideally it should cost nothing.
Yep.
But anyway, so I mean, beyond that, I think it's always also fair to say that you don't need to be a savior. If you are in a moment in your life where you're at the end of your rope, you are just spread way too thin, you are whatever it is, right? And somebody approaches you needing help and you are just really just not the one
You
to
can
help
say
them,
no.
you can absolutely say no. And there is nothing wrong with you saying no. You do not need to play the savior. There is nothing noble, there is nothing honorable about completely depleting your resources and burning yourself out to the point of exhaustion, sickness, failure, death to help other people. There is nothing honorable or noble about that, because all that does is put you in a position where now you're the one who ultimately has to seek out and
Yep.
and claim and take from someone else to be able to replenish yourself, right? So don't play the savior. You can be a healer, right? But you don't want to be a savior. That is a trap every time. Okay. And and in answering, I guess, your question in another way, like you don't need to be trying to fix all the time.
Don't be the savior. Be the leader. Lead by example.
There you go. I guess that's another way to put it. Okay. All right. Okay. So moving on to our next few questions here. All right. This is some stuff from our buddy Jack. Jack says they were diving into the podcast again, center around the Latin occult scene, and the topic that came up was exorcisms and the people that perform them. But there were some things that came up that had Jack feeling curious. They believe that we have spoke on the subject before, but the methods of performing an exorcism vary by culture, and that is very true.
Very true.
The one in this particular circumstance pertains to the Spanish branch of the Catholic faith. From what Jack gathered, if a person is legitimately possessed, they call in a priest from the church that specializes in exorcisms, and that is true. If they're Catholic, that's usually what's done.
Hmm.
Um, the priest then performs the exorcism with various tools like water, oil, crucifix, and the like. What was interesting was the mention of a mirror and how it had to be used during the rite. Apparently, according to my recollection, when a person is possessed, the mirrors are unclothed or uncovered to allow the spirit to be placed within them, and then the mirror is disposed of. In situations where a person is channeling a spirit of the deceased, the mirror had to be covered so that a demon wouldn't hide inside it and wait for the channeled spirit to depart, for the demon to then take over the body, which consequently keeps the owner from re-entering the body or regaining control. If the latter, the belief is that the person has then died from channeling, and then the body is pure, if purified, also dies or lies in a comatose state, excuse me, unless the owner's spirit is retrieved and placed back. Okay, so So you're kind of yeah, so this is legit. And this is kind of all over the place a little bit. This is something that is this isn't like a strictly Catholic thing.
Mhm.
This is something that actually really is kind of more derived from Latin folk customs and folk beliefs around the way that malicious spirits and particularly restless spirits, like undead or restless spirits, behave,
Mhm.
or disembodied spirits are likely to behave. Um, uh, we you I we you we what am I trying to say? Um, this isn't something that you're going to find a lot of Catholic people who are authorities on Catholicism vouching for, primarily because within the kind of like the doctrine of Catholicism, when a human soul departs the body, that soul isn't kind of allowed to linger. Like the idea of a mirror needing to be covered to prevent a soul from being held within a mirror or something like that. Like you're not going to really find supporting documentation or really belief or discussion around that within Catholicism because that just isn't something that they're going to give credit to. For one thing, it goes against the doctrine of Catholicism in that ultimately only God gets to determine where that soul uh, would go, where that soul can reside. Um, so that would be one thing that would probably determine that this wouldn't really be something that would originate within Catholicism. It comes from older folk practices that most likely have been kind of syncretized with Catholicism in Latin culture. But other than that, yes, this is something that I am familiar with. And that is one of the reasons why you see mirrors in particular popping up in a lot of cultures and a lot of superstition around mirrors being covered or needing to be covered or being, in some cultures, like they'll even take mirrors out of the room. Like if people get sick, like, like where they're like worried the person is ill enough that they might die, like they'll actually take mirrors out of the room.
Mhm.
And so yeah, so mirrors have a lot of significance in a lot of folklore belief
Mhm.
or folk custom and belief. Um, so on to your questions. Okay, so question one, from your experience and opinions on the matter, can you place some validity to these claims or how they could or would work in practice if they were true? So I think I kind of just did the validity piece on that. Okay, so how they could or should work in practice if it were true. Um, as far as how they could or would work, we've talked about mirrors in past episodes, particularly the idea of mirrors functioning as portals for spirits. Um, and I'm gonna say mirrors really to function effectively as portals for spirits, particularly like goetic or demonic spirits. Um, in the context of exorcism, possession slash exorcism, those mirrors are going to have needed to have been prepared in some way.
Mhm.
The average mirror that you would say like have hanging on a wall or like a mirror in a vanity or a curio or whatever cabinet, whatever. Um, those those are that's basically just glass with like a silver backing. I mean, that's all that is. Um, you know, you're gonna need a mirror to have been really kind of ritually prepared to really be able to function effectively as a doorway, a portal, or even beyond that, some sort of receptacle of holding. Um, so I don't know really how commonly something like this might occur. I don't know. What's your take on that, Austin?
Um, it gets down to the folk magic and the culture of it, because each folk tradition is going to have their own beliefs and mirrors, though they all do kind of coincide with like portal, something you trap.
Yeah, the portal is
Um,
a big one.
mhm. And the thing is they're all going to look at them differently, work with them differently, and they're all going to have different stories as to why that is so. So, as I am not a monolith for every culture, I cannot do that. But
Who is a monolith?
Jesus.
I just like we hear that a lot, and that's absolutely true. Like no one person is a monolith, but it makes me wonder sometimes because we hear that a lot. Yeah, I just wonder, like, is there someone out there that is a monolith?
Anyway, so I don't know. Maybe there is. Is it you? It's you.
No. Oh God. No. That's
Um,
way too much responsibility.
um, but like in Italian culture, mirrors are big and into portals because of Lake Navy.
Mm.
Like that's what I can tell you. And there you go.
Yeah.
So there it is.
Okay. Yeah. So again, so just bottom line, I don't know how I don't know how valid this would be really. You know, like I said, I think that you're gonna need to see that there has been some sort of additional ritual work done to those mirrors for them to really be functioning in these
Mhm.
capacities.
Well, it's also kind of
Um,
like objects of faith, and if some how strong someone's belief is in that thing as well.
that is very true, you know, and I think that it does probably bear since we're kind of talking about that since you've raised that. Um, that detail I think is probably good to say that, you know, in a lot of instances where we've seen reported possession phenomena, you know, and it's been speculated that an exorcism has been needed. In a lot of those situations, what ultimately has actually happened is you're dealing with someone who is dealing with like probably some serious state of psychosis,
Hmm.
and you know, and there isn't really a demonic possession that has occurred. You're dealing with someone that is in a state of, again, of supreme psych, like a serious psychotic state,
Hmm.
right? But very often, people who experience extreme states of psychosis will also have very strong psychokinetic ability.
Hmm.
Those things can very often go hand in hand. That's one of the reasons that you see people who can sometimes lapse into extreme psychotic states. It's one of the reasons that they have psychotic states is because they're also very psychically gifted. And those things, and I'm not saying this is always the case. Everybody out there that has issues with psychosis is not psychic, is not spiritually gifted. I'm not trying to say that. Okay. But every once in a while, you will find someone who has extreme mental health issues, someone who is diagnosably mentally, like extremely mentally ill, and they also have very powerful psychic ability, up to the point of psychokinesis slash telekinesis. You know, and so I think that what often happens in these situations is someone who is in a psychotic state that might have something within the realm of maybe like hallucinatory behavior. Well, maybe what some people might identify as dissociative, schizophrenic kind of manifestations of behavior, where it might seem as though they are possessed. This person could also be manifesting other types of psychokinetic behavior. Say they are altering things physically in the room, maybe potentially moving small objects in
Hmm.
the room,
The
altering the
temperature,
temperature in the room, right? Like
making lights flash.
people can do these things. People can absolutely do these things. You know, and so with that being said, it is possible that someone with those kinds of abilities could project something psychically into something like a mirror. And if someone else, other people in the room were already of the belief that mirrors were portals or mirrors were capable of being vessels of some sort, it is possible that the combined power of the projector and the people in the room that were believing in that already, that the combined energy there, the combined belief there could create something like this. You know, I've seen weirder shit occur. You know, and so yeah, so who knows? But that would be such a rare, I mean, just the way for that to line up, the for that would be such a rare. Oh my gosh, yeah, like that. I just don't know how likely that would be to occur, really, at least too consistently. You know, obviously it has, right? Because we have record, we have stories of these things occurring, right?
Hmm.
So obviously it has occurred, but the likelihood to which it would, I don't know, at least not too consistently.
Yeah.
So. All right. Second question. How does one technically become possessed? Oh God, I teach a whole class on this shit. Oh geez. And could there be a partial possession? Um, a partial possession would be something I think kind of akin to being basically ridden by spirit.
Yeah. Yes, a partial possession would be akin to being ridden by spirit, I do believe. Because when you're ridden by spirit, you're aware of what's going on and not necessarily in full control usually, but usually conscious or cognizant enough that something like, excuse me,
My goodness.
that something like,
It wouldn't be an episode if one of us wasn't yawning or coughing.
true, that something like, you know, getting sprayed with cold water could take them out of, and stuff like that. But partial possession, yeah,
So yeah, so that could be a thing. And I think that to be honest, I think that would probably look different for each person.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but that's actually, I think, something that's really commonly practiced in a lot of different cultures where people intentionally call a spirit in.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so okay, so I'm gonna answer the first part of this one as far as like technically how one becomes possessed. I'm gonna try to answer this as succinctly as possible. And again, bear in mind, this is all just theory, right? Because who the hell knows? Okay. But again, if you kind of look into the way that these things are discussed in by lots of different metaphysicians, okay, and when you look at the way or the kind of the belief or the understanding that different types of beings exist at different frequencies, people like to use the term vibration. Ugh, gross, right? I like to use the term frequency, right? Which is no less gross, but but I got to be different because I'm that bitch. Anyway, but different types of life, different variations of life form, we all exist at different frequencies, right? And I like to go with that one instead of the term vibration because it makes a bit more sense when you think about energy and the way that we understand that the universe is all just energy, right? And this is my little clump of energy, and that's Austin's clump of energy, right? But everything is just energy, right? Set to a particular frequency, right? Um, and every living being, every sentient being, every intelligent being, including the beings that we would identify as demons, goetic spirits, are also they are our energy. They are energy, and they have a different frequency to their physical being, to their existence, but also to the kind of the realm, kind of the plane of existence that they exist on. It sits at a different frequency to the one that we exist on. We don't exist in the same realm or the same plane of being, right? So what happens, the theory is that a human, right? We exist kind of on our plane of existence, right? We live here, right? And say the goetic spirits, demons, they kind of their plane of existence, like they're here, right? Okay, so we're just kind of like we're neighbors, right? Neighboring planes, right? But just far enough away where we don't really regularly interact, at least not physically, right? Like we're not sharing the same plane of existence. We're not living next to each other physically, right? Okay, but what happens, okay, is humans when we experience serious trauma when we are extremely ill, when we are when I say trauma, I mean not only emotional but also potentially physical trauma. When we fall into serious patterns of like addiction, like really like self-destructive kinds of patterns of addiction, right? Basically, when something really bad happens to us, right? Something that potentially alters the individual frequency of our energy to a point where it knocks us, like it kind of knocks us off of our regular plane of existence, right? What we sometimes see happening is our energy as an individual being, right? Our frequency will alter just enough, right? That we see ourselves kind of shift or change just enough. Remember, we were kind of right here, right? Okay. And our energy will change enough, our frequency will change enough that we start to kind of shift just a bit, right? And we move, I'm gonna move these a little bit closer, right? Like we start to shift or change just a bit. And where we normally sit here on an energetic level, on a frequency level, we start to kind of move up just a little bit closer. And our frequency starts to kind of move just a bit closer to the natural frequency of maybe where those goetic spirits normally reside. Okay. And what happens sometimes, and and we're still not on that plane, right? Like we can't sit on that plane. That's not a plane that we can exist on because we're not those spirits. We can't exist at that frequency, but we're close. We're closer than we normally are, right? So what happens in that instance is that we get close enough that one of those spirits who is maybe also sensitive or aware in the ways that maybe we are as psychics, right? Senses us, feels like, oh, hey, something's up in the ether, right? And because they also have the ability to fluctuate their frequency a bit, they start to match the different frequency that they're feeling. And then we see a bridge established. And once that bridge is established and we see kind of a temporary, a very temporary meeting of those frequencies, that is when we see possession occur. And that's a very difficult moment when that happens because in that instance, neither the human or the goetic spirit is happy. The human body cannot exist at a frequency that is going to be comfortable for us. We cannot exist at a frequency that will be able to effectively house a goetic spirit's being and still function healthily as a human. We can't do that. That would be like oh God, I'm trying to think of like an example. That would be like trying to live under the conditions of Chernobyl all the time, right? Where you were constantly being exposed to like high radiation, right? Like you cannot live in that environment. You cannot live in that frequency and still be healthy as a human, right? And the same is true of a goetic spirit. Goetic spirits cannot exist in a material human plane, and still be basically be functioning and be healthy at their natural frequency energetically. So when you see possession occur, that's one of the reasons why you see this upset and this pain and this anger and this difficulty occurring between these two spirits is you basically now have two spirits existing at an in-between kind of frequency, at an in-between energetic state
At
that
a
is
dissonance.
not home. Exactly, at a dissonant state that is not a home state for either of them. And they have to kind of figure out now, like, oh, what do we do? Right? Like we both have to be able to kind of break away and get back to our natural state, and that's ultimately what an exorcism really does. A lot of people think that an exorcism is all about banishing a demon, and that's not really what it is. An exorcism, what it does energetically is an exorcism separates the human from the demon. It breaks the bridge. It breaks the connecting. It basically it sends those two different energetic vibrations. It sends them back to the respective planes of existence that they're supposed to be. So you're not banished. Nobody's being banished. We're not banishing a demon.
It untangles
It
them.
basically that's exactly what it is. It's a disentangling of those energies, right? But that's one of the reasons why you'll see or you hear stories about demons being angry and destructive when they find themselves in situations of possession is they're like I'm not happy, I'm really uncomfortable right now, I'm connected to this mortal body right now, and now I know what it feels like to be pain or to feel pain. And I've never had to deal with human pain before. This fucking sucks. How do you people deal with these little bodies of yours? They hurt, right? And then you have this human soul that's like being energetically like just in this state of chaos and turmoil all the time because demons energetically are constantly in flux, right? They are like fire and smoke and wind, and we are spiritually on a level we don't vibrate in that way. We're not at that frequency, right? So it's a tricky state for both of us, and so exorcism is not this phenomena that occurs because demons are trying to take you over or trying to steal your soul to banish you to hell. Trust me, demons don't want your fucking soul. Most demons would have no fucking clue what to do with a human soul, right?
Yeah. Well, and when we
Um,
see how the demon is reacting, especially in true cases of possession, where it is saying things like that the soul is going to be mine, da, 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 really effectively the goal of that demon is not to get that not to get the soul, it's to kill the person so that it can no longer be there.
Exactly. Yes, because
It
once,
doesn't care about
yeah,
the soul.
exactly. Because once the body dies, once the mortal body dies, then the energetic bridge is going to end, is
Mhm.
disconnected, and then the demon can be free one way or
Yes.
another.
Well,
So, and that's one of the other benefits of performing an exorcism is you can separate those energies, and the human body and soul in that situation does not have there doesn't need to be a mortal death.
yeah,
You want to say something?
there was, but I can't remember.
Oh, gone that quickly?
Um, yeah,
Okay. All right.
must not
So
have been that important.
So that's my very very quick, very cliff notes of version. You remember?
I remember.
Go for it.
That's where we see faith playing such an important part, also psychologically, is um, these spirits, demons, whatever you want to call them, um, can tell by what's going on and the energy and the frequency and stuff in that situation that, oh, these people are afraid. I'm going to utilize that fear against them, which is why the person who has no faith in the Catholic Church, who goes to get the Catholic priest for the exorcism, not much is really going to happen. Faith is very important because faith also um, works on a psychological level,
Yep.
which then can encourage the human body to come back to reality. Well, there goes gravity.
There goes gravity.
Yeah. I
Okay.
was listening to the radio today and Eminem came on.
Oh, I see. Okay. Anyway, so as I was saying, that's my very Cliff Notes version of that explanation for possession. Um, I teach a class
Demons and
uh on
discarnates.
demons and discarnates, and I kind of go more in depth on that. And there are a few more pieces to that process, but for the sake of brevity, that's the bulk of it, though, right there. Yeah, so something to consider. Yeah. All right. Can a person truly die from channeling, and could the soul be displaced? So
I'm going to say anything is possible.
well, I would agree with Austin. You know, we live in a limitless universe where just about anything is possible. So I would agree with Austin where I say like it is possible that something like this could occur. Um, I don't think that someone channeling. I don't think. Well, okay. Let me walk that back a little bit. I don't believe that a person could die from channeling, mainly because channeling is something that occur when people are channeling, they are not completely beyond control of what is going on. Okay, channeling is not possession.
Yeah.
Okay, channeling is a different skill. It is a different phenomena. And when you are channeling, you are still somewhat consciously aware of what is going on. So no, I'm gonna say I'm just gonna say no. I don't believe that you can die from channeling. Um, at least not in the way that I think that you're maybe kind of alluding to with this question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, could the soul be displaced? Yes. And I say that primarily because I'm kind of a big believer. I've seen a lot of evidence and I've had interactions with a lot of people over the years to support the theory of walk-ins. And I'm not sure if those of you who watch this episode, if you're familiar with what a walk-in is, but walk-in theory is something that would support um, my personal belief that yes, that souls can be displaced.
Mm-hmm.
But when I say that, I want to qualify again that when I say displaced, I mean displaced with purpose. Like this is intentional.
Yeah, it's not like
And
something just jumped in because,
and these are not souls that are when they're being displaced. That doesn't mean that these are souls that are just like boop and now you're gone. Like these are souls that are removed from their current incarnation um deliberately and they are taken and placed somewhere else. Okay,
for
so
some
so
other
so
reason.
yes, so it is a deliberate thing, right? And the reason that that occurs usually is because another soul is then brought into that situation. Um, yeah. So yeah, so you can Google walk-ins as like spiritual walk-ins. And you'll probably find a lot of nonsense out there because there are a lot of people in the New Age community that have kind of taken over the whole theory of walk-ins. But basically, the idea is that you are born into a life as the soul that you are. And then typically you have an experience during the course of your lifetime, say like you die, right? Like if you
Near
physically
death
die,
experience, yeah.
like yeah, what some people would identify as a near death experience. Um, and during that experience, you and this is, this of course this isn't always the case, right? But very, on occasion, people will determine like that soul that has died, that it was a part of that body when it died, will determine that they have kind of done what they needed to do, right? But say there's another soul maybe that's like, well,
Yeah,
maybe I
the
have
body's
some,
still in good
yeah,
working
like the
order,
body is still capable of physical function,
but we got it
right?
to trade in.
Basically, yeah, right. Well, it's like a lease,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Where
a
you're
spiritual
like,
lease. Yeah.
yeah, right. Where you're like, oh, I leased this car for 3 years, so now I'm going to trade it in, and now somebody else can lease it, right? That's exactly it, right? But then another soul will kind of move in and take over that body, and usually what occurs in a situation like that is that when that person like wakes up, like when they come out of that coma or when they regain consciousness from that accident, whatever it is, right? Um, they're very different. And there's like actual evidence, like this is something that's been studied, I think, since like the 70s at least, where there's been evidence of people that have claimed to be walk-ins where like they're like all of a sudden like they're left-handed now,
Yeah.
or they speak different
Or
languages
they're not
now,
allergic to peanuts.
or yeah, or like they had allergies before, like where they were allergic to peanuts and now they're not allergic to
Hmm.
peanuts anymore,
I
you
have
know.
one. So I have a client who I have a client and a customer who comes into the shop quite frequently, or has come into the shop quite frequently, and they have had several surgeries. They've had several near-death experiences, and they've always come back as them. And this go around, they came back and they didn't. So they came in to see what was wrong. Something was not right. I did a Reiki session on them, and I was like, "This isn't you. You this isn't you." And I was like, do you want some chocolate pudding? Because I got this like so guys.
Hey, all right, you guys. Sorry, management is being spooked by something.
I got this taste of chocolate pudding. And uh they were like, I've always hated chocolate pudding and now I can't get enough of it. So
So yeah,
very interesting.
yeah. So it's an interesting thing. All right. Okay. Final question. How much of this information is either false or misunderstood? What would you do differently? I think we kind of clarified that as we went through.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't really know that we need to answer that one. So yeah. So um okay, we're back. And I have somehow grown 2 feet. No. Sorry, we had to pause for just a second there because we had to answer the door. We try to record podcasts, and as I'm sure many of you can appreciate, the rest of the world does not afford us the time and the peace to be able to do that. So yeah, so we had to go and deal with something in the middle of trying to record this for you. Um, which I guess is actually probably a good segue to a conversation that we need to have. Um, this episode is going to be our last. Um, we've really enjoyed doing the podcast. We've done the podcast now for I think 3 years,
3 or 4 years, yeah.
kind of hit and miss. I know we took kind of a big hiatus earlier this last year, this year,
We've
earlier
taken
this
a lot
year.
of hiatuses because of
Well,
life.
I mean, just life and just the stress of running the shop. We pulled some analytics recently, and it's looking like we we have like a whole 12 people listening to us at this point. Um, and I think the reason for that primarily is because we decided to stop being mean. When we first started the podcast, we were kind of snippy and snarky and
Salty.
kind of bitchy and salty. And this last year we decided we were going to kind of make an effort to be a little more constructive. And people really just don't like the nice stuff. And I just don't know that I have it in me anymore to be an asshole.
I don't have the
Um,
desire.
so this is going to be our last episode. But we still want to be available for all of you to help support you and to answer your questions. So we're looking at a few things to still be available. Um, what I'd like to ask you all to do maybe is to consider joining us for our monthly Ask a Witch that we do. We do a virtual live stream each month through the shop on Instagram.
Yes.
It's basically it's just it's a live, it's like a Q&A panel where you can actually just ask questions like in the moment instead of having to send them over email
Hmm.
or on Messenger, right? So you get an answer right then instead of having to wait a couple weeks for us to get back to you. And we do that usually about middle of the month. It's always
Hmm.
on our calendar. So if you follow us or check out our websites for the shop, Cat and Cauldron, you'll find it on the calendar each month.
If
Austin,
at this point you haven't figured out that we own a metaphysical shop, I don't know what podcast you've been listening to, but it's not ours.
yeah. Um,
At this point, if you're like, well, what's the name of their shop? I will tell you, even though it should be very obvious. Cat and Cauldron. You can find it at CAT, the letter N, CAULDRON.com. You'll be able to see all the upcoming classes, events, book with any of the psychics we have. You can submit questions there if you want, but really the Ask which is going to be so much better. It's going to be so much better
mhm.
because, again, in the moment. And
So check us out there. You can also go and follow Austin on his TikTok page. Austin is very good for answering questions on his TikTok page. And what is that TikTok page?
my TikTok page is at Austin underscore the underscore witch.
And if you're somebody who actually likes the salt and the sass, go follow him on TikTok because he's going to give you plenty of that.
Not really. I haven't
Um,
lately.
you can also, if it's something really pressing, you can still send us an email. It might take us a few days to get back to you, but we'll still get back to you with an answer. We'll email you back, right? Um, and we might still, I'm thinking about maybe doing like I don't know that I can do it weekly, but I think I might still try to do like maybe like a regular stream on Instagram, maybe on Friday afternoons, where I can answer questions maybe as we get them. So this isn't like a goodbye necessarily. This is just we're not doing the podcast anymore.
And it is in an effort
Um,
to afford us a better work-life balance.
we're very busy, and and we love being a resource to all of you. Um, but we're we're struggling to be able to keep up with all the responsibilities that we have in our lives here. And yeah, and we need to kind of take some back. And
Well, we need to take some back, and we have given a lot.
well, and that's okay. We're not bitching about doing this. This is our work, right?
Mhm.
So we're still available to all of you. We're just probably just not available on this platform anymore. Um, so yeah, so please still send us your questions. Okay, we are still here. Okay, and we do still want to be helpful to you. Okay. Yeah.
You can also register for online classes by picking up the phone and calling Cat and Cauldron. I'm not going to give the phone number because that'll be out there for everyone. I mean, technically it's on the internet, so it's already going to be out there for everyone. So fuck it.
Yeah, you can go to the website and
Go to
you
the
can see
website.
our classes and give us a call if you're interested in taking a class.
And they are interactive,
Yeah.
full Zoom,
It's
live.
it's live. Um,
And then if it's a class with me, I actually will record it and I can send it to you if you are unable to make it.
in the new year, we're also going to be doing a lot more with the Temple of Hecate. A lot of more events and things will be kind of falling under the umbrella of the temple. And much of that is also going to be made available, will be streamed online.
Hmm.
So do look for some of those events as well. And because a lot of that will also be helpful.
Hmm.
Yeah, but it's been a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed the last 3 years. I think it's been just the 3 years. And yeah, God, like 3 years, and I think, God, almost 200 episodes. All of them aren't still online though. We had to take a bunch of them off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, like I said, you continue to message us, info@catandcauldron.com. You can contact us on Facebook, on Instagram. And like I said, don't be strangers. Don't be afraid to send us your questions. We'll get back to you with info. And yeah, and follow those other places. Maybe, like I said, follow the Ask a Witch, follow Austin. Maybe check us out. Like I said, maybe we'll do some other things on Instagram. Okay, and we'll continue to do what we can to provide some resources as we can. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for kind of taking this journey with us. Okay, and we hope that you all have a safe and healthy 2025. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Yeah.
Happy witching.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.